You've heard of Bitcoin, right? Of course you have. But to really get what it's all about, we need to go back and look at a problem that had computer scientists totally stumped for decades. In this explainer, we're digging into the real why behind Bitcoin, the fascinating search for digital trust. At its heart, this is the whole challenge. Think about it. Physical cash is something you can hold, you can see it, it's tangible. But when money is just a string of ones and zeros on a computer, how do you really know it's real? How can you trust that it actually belongs to you and that you can spend it without a hitch? So, any system of digital money, for it to work at all, has to answer three huge questions. First, is it authentic? Is it not counterfeit? With paper bills, we have special inks and watermarks. But with a digital file, we need a way to stop someone from just hitting copy-paste and making themselves infinitely rich. Second, and this is the big one, can it only be spent once? This is the famous double spend problem. A physical dollar can't be in two places at the same time, but a digital file? Oh yeah, you could email it to two people at once. Big problem. And third, how do I prove the money I have is actually mine? Okay, so let's jump back to the late 1980s. Cryptography is really starting to take off, and some brilliant minds started tackling these very questions. They began creating the first ever forms of digital cash, and they got so close to cracking it. But every single one of them shared one single fatal flaw. For proving authenticity, they had a pretty solid solution: digital signatures. That worked well. But to solve that tricky double spend problem, they all did the same thing. They relied on a central company, a trusted third party, to keep a master ledger and verify every single transaction. You can think of it just like a bank clearing checks, right? This approach worked, technically, but it also created a massive vulnerability. And that was it. That was the fatal flaw: centralization. By relying on one single entity to manage the whole system, they basically painted a giant glowing bullseye on its back, a single point of attack. And that single point of failure was a total disaster waiting to happen. Hackers knew exactly where to aim. Governments could shut the whole operation down with a single court order. In some cases, the company behind the currency just went out of business, and all the digital money, poof, it just vanished. It became crystal clear that for digital money to ever be truly robust, it couldn't have a leader. It absolutely had to be decentralized. But for years, that just seemed impossible. I mean, how can you possibly run a system with no one in charge? It sounds chaotic. So after decades of these failed attempts, a truly revolutionary idea just quietly appeared online. So after all those attempts in the 80s and 90s fizzled out, the whole concept of digital cash kind of went quiet. Then, boom. In 2008, a paper gets published by a totally anonymous author, and it proposes this radical new decentralized system. And this wasn't just a theory. Less than a year later, in 2009, the network based on that very paper went live. The paper was titled Bitcoin, a Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System, and it was published under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. The genius was right there in the title: peer-to-peer. This wasn't about a central server or a company controlling everything. No, this was about a network of equals. And this was the core breakthrough: the idea of a system that could operate all on its own, without a boss, without a central company, without any single point of control that could be attacked or corrupted. This was the solution everyone had been looking for, but until that moment, nobody knew how to actually build it. So how in the world did Satoshi do it? How did Bitcoin finally solve that decades-old double spend problem without a central bank to check all the transactions? The answer was an absolutely ingenious process called proof of work. Satoshi's idea was to turn the job of validating transactions into a kind of giant global lottery. Roughly every 10 minutes, computers all over the world start competing to solve a really complex math puzzle. The first one to solve it wins the lottery, and the prize is the right to validate the latest block of transactions and add it to a public shared ledger. And by doing this over and over, the entire network comes to an agreement. And that agreement is called consensus. It's how a massive, distributed group of complete strangers can all agree on a single version of the truth, which transactions are real and which are not, all without a leader telling them what to do. It solved the double spend problem in a completely decentralized way. It was brilliant. And to prove just how truly decentralized the system was, in April of 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto, whose real identity is still one of the biggest mysteries of the internet, just disappeared. They left the project in the hands of a volunteer community, and it has continued to run and grow ever since, governed only by transparent mathematical rules. This invention was absolutely groundbreaking, but its true importance goes way beyond just creating a new kind of money. It was actually a solution to a much deeper, much older problem in computer science. This deeper problem is known as the Byzantine generals problem. Just imagine a group of generals surrounding a city. They all need to agree on a single plan: attack or retreat. The catch is, they can only communicate by sending messengers, and some of those messengers might be captured, or even worse, some of the generals might be traitors. So how do they all agree on a single plan when they can't fully trust each other or their communication network? Well, it turns out that Bitcoin's proof of work system was the first practical solution to this problem ever. It finally showed how a distributed network could achieve consensus, how it could establish trust without needing any central authority. This breakthrough didn't just create digital cash, it created a whole new way to engineer trust, sparking entire new fields of research in computing and economics. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question. For centuries, we have relied on central institutions, banks, governments, big corporations, to create trust for us. Bitcoin showed us that another way is possible. So what else can we build? What else is possible when you can engineer trust directly into a system without needing a leader at all?